we start. And let me start with non-payment of yearly advance of $6 million US. And I'm quoting from the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of Ghana, ministries, departments, and other agencies for the year ended 31st December 2024. Now, the ministry, there was a contract of commercialization of e-government infrastructure between Ministry of Communications and Digitalization. That was the name during her government's time. Now we have changed the name.
You said what?
No. And infrastructure. And Lebara Ghana Limited, signed on August 15, 2018, says that during the term of the initial 5-year period of the contract, Lebara Ghana shall make an advance payment of $2 million US for the first year, and thereafter a yearly advance payment of $1 million US to Ministry of Communications and Digitalization. Pursuant to clause 4.5 of the principal contract, Lebara Ghana Limited assigned all its rights and responsibilities to Smart Infraco. We noted that between 2020 and 2024, Smart Infraco, a special purpose vehicle, failed to remit to the ministry a total amount of $6 million as yearly advance payment, which becomes due on the first quarter of each year. And then it has a yes over here. 2020, $2 million not paid. 2021, $1 million not paid. 2022, $1 million not paid. 2023, the same way. 2024, same way. We recommend that the Chief Director should recover the total amount of $6 million US with interest at the prevailing Bank of Ghana rate from Smart Infraco, failing which remedies as stipulated in the contract should be activated. Minister, what says you?
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, this contract actually started in 2015 when I served on the board of the National IT Agency. In fact, Madam Rita Shraha, who is today Managing Director, was also on the board at the time when that board approved for the then MD to engage Lebara. The contract was not consummated before we left office in 2016, and the Akufo-Addo government took the decision to sign with Lebara in 2018. The terms of the contract are as you have read out in the Auditor General's report. However, we have been appraised of addendums to the original contract. Addendums which have sought to alter the letter and spirit of the original contract. The original contract was for Lebara Ghana, a private company, to commercialize the excess capacity of NITA, the National IT Agency. There had been about $300 million worth of investment by the John Mahama I administration. And so we asked that the infrastructure of NITA should be commercialized and there should be a profit sharing between the private entity and NITA. However, we were very clear that it should be on new business. So NITA already had a number of government agencies as its client. That business was supposed to be exempt from this commercialization because this new entity was not going to be bringing in this new business. But for example, on the Eastern Corridor Fiber, you had 48 core, and at that time we were using less than 6 core. And so to commercialize the rest of the infrastructure, we said we needed a private vehicle to do this. There were 120 LTE base stations which we thought could be commercialized. Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, it's become evidence to us that there have been 2 addendums that have changed the contract, handed over fully the entire government infrastructure to this private entity. In fact, an SPV was set up called Smart Infraco, that took over all rights of Libara Ghana. Now, I have referred this to the Attorney General for his advice, but the issues we have raised for the Attorney General to advise us on is that the terms of the original contract stated that Libara could not assign more than 20% of their rights to a third party. Now, the current situation is an SPV has been set up called Smart Infraco that has taken over 100% of Libara's rights. The other issue that arises is the fact that when we took over the ministry and there was the need to change passwords for some government agencies, it became clear to me, and unfortunately my Director General for NITA is not here, he's a bit under the weather. NITA had no access to the National Data Center.
Minister, you mentioned that the terms had changed in one breath, and in another breath you also said that they had also amended the main contract. So isn't the change of terms, wasn't it as a result of the amendment of the original contract?
Exactly so, Madam Chair. But again, I leave this for the advice of the Attorney General and the lawyers, that you cannot alter the terms of a parent contract in such a manner that vitiates the intent of the original contract. Because the original contract said you could not assign more than 20%. Now you have a situation where you've done an addendum that has taken over the entire rights and handed them over. So again, that's a question for the lawyers to determine if that is legally right and permissible by our laws. But the change in the terms are on the basis of that addendum. Now the question is, against the spirit and letter of the original contract, is that admissible? The fact that it was signed, is it legally tenable, and is that's a matter for the Attorney General that we've written to. But like the point I was making was, when we took over office and when I was appointed in February 2025, we realized that NITA, the National IT Agency, had absolutely no access to the National Data Center, and for them to be able to effect the changes, they needed to make a request to the private entity, Smart Infraco. That I called the meeting immediately and requested for a meeting, and now NITA has root access to the National Data Center and has fiscal access as well to the data center. On the issue of the 6 million, that was part of the original contract. Now my understanding from the briefings we've received is that Smart Infraco says they spent money doing rectification of the infrastructure that they acquired. And for that reason, they are offsetting it against what was supposed to be deliverables to NITA. My position as minister has been clear. You have an obligation under the contract, meet those obligations. Pay the $6 million to NITA. Then submit your claims for any rectifications that you did. Let that be authenticated and verified. And then let's see the terms of the contract. Did the terms of the agreement say that you were supposed to take the infrastructure in situ the way it was? Or were you supposed to take it and rectify it at the expense of the state? Those are questions that need to be settled. So this 6 million is owed the state, and we've written to the Attorney General to advise us on the steps to reclaim this $6 million. But Mr. Chair, the last point I will make is that I believe that this matter is of grave national importance, because the infrastructure we talk about is our national data center. That's where all our critical assets sit. As we speak, the country is aware of what's going on with the Ministry of Health and the LIMS contract. Mr. Chair, the Ministry of Health has reached out to us to provide some support for the stopgap measure they want to do. Now, we are being told that that contract, which is not being, or this service that we are going to render from the National Data Center to the Ministry of Health, must be signed with this private entity and payments made to the private entity. And so I have written officially to the Director General of NITA, instructing him to engage the Ministry of Health directly and not through the private entity, because the assets is the property of the Ghanaian people, paid for in full by the Ghanaian people with our taxes, And this is another government agency we are offering services to. If any payments will be made, it will be made to NITA directly. The terms of the contract must be that Smart Infraco should go and bring new contracts and new jobs and share revenue. And not that they sit back and then our government asset has been handed over to a private entity and they are commercializing it and taking all the revenue. This is what I inherited, and this is what we are trying to fix.
Thank you very much, Minister. I can understand the explanations you are giving to this committee. Our concern has to do with public funds that ought to come to the public. Whatever you are suggesting sounds to me like a policy direction that you want to undertake. When the report came before this committee, we wrote to the companies involved, and they have also given us their response. But just so we are all on the same page and we do not take these things so lightly, I want to read to you that the report from Smart Infraco, they claim that clause 6 required that Smart Infraco restored all infrastructure within 12 months using its own capital. They also claim in clause 6.4 that the company was allowed to deduct capital expenditure, direct cost, and taxes before calculating revenue share. And in clause 12 of the same report, it also states that there was a second addendum which overrides the original contract in case of inconsistencies. And I seem to understand your concern with changes in contracts and all of that, but with a few contract law that we've learned, this is a clear case of novation. One company, one private company moving to the other. Because they are not here, and because it also involves some legal documents and all of that, that is why we're also reading to you the response that they have given to this committee. So I want to find out from you if you have an idea of what the company is saying, and that the clauses that they claim, especially clause 6 and 12, are contained in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just pulled out the contract, and I'm going to read the original contract, the parent contract. I'm going to read clause 4, and the heading for 4 is cost and risk. 4.1 says, save the procurement of an irrevocable bank guarantee or letters of credit. Libara Ghana shall undertake the obligations of this contract project at its own cost and risk. So now this means that whatever cost was supposed to arise out of the execution of the contract, this is clearly stated here, and like you said, contract law, clause 4.1, would be at the instance of Libara Ghana, the parent company, the company that we signed the contract with. So, you see, we need to be minded as public office holders that whilst we want to support private business, we cannot do it at the expense of the Ghanaian taxpayer. So if the original contract says that any cost and risk associated with the execution of this contract is at the expense of the private party, and then a minister takes a decision to vary that in an addendum and say that she's transferring that cost and risk from the private entity to the Ghanaian taxpayer, there must be proper justification for same. Unless you show me what it is, I, as minister, with the evidence available to me, still hold the view that whatever was agreed in the parent contract, which is the 6 million we're talking about here for the first 5 years, should be paid to the tax kitty. If there are any conversations to be had about whether there's an addendum that has shifted liability for cost, we can then have that conversation. But to deprive the taxpayer of this anticipated revenue on the back of a policy directive, I think may be problematic.
See, Minister, we are not here to want to defend any past government official, and I can understand. Once the new government takes over, there's a new direction and and from how you speak, we realize that probably maybe you would want NITA to take a different direction with respect to this contract. But once the state has a contract with some parties, I can see the original contract, which was signed somewhere in 2018 with Libara, is what you are making references to. But I also want to bring to your attention that in 2020, this same contract was novated to Smart Infraco Limited. And this was with approval of all parties. And of course, in terms of contracts, addendums and variations are always, they come in. I mean, we can vary a contract subject to the fact that all parties have come into a certain agreement. And I also know that you are aware, because we have with us a due diligence report that was conducted by Tata Communications Limited, and we've been provided with that report, and I'm sure it's going to help us moving forward. But so that you know that addendums in contracts are not illegal. They are not unlawful. It happens every day in contracts. And so let's speak to what exactly we have that got varied along the line, along the value chain in this contract. And I think that it will help the committee. Thank you very much.
I must also admit that in the response that they gave to us, Smart Infraco admits that they owe. So it is not like they are not acknowledging that they owe governments. From their reports, the report that they gave to us on page 5 of 8, it says that Smart Infraco acknowledges the outstanding amount of $1 million in addition to a balance of $162,518, and which has been featured in the accounts and submitted to the ministry. So there is some liability that they themselves have acknowledged. But from what I read from their reports, that the addendum necessitated a change in the advance payments. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I have read, they are saying that the addendum that they made to the original contract, the variation that they made to the original contract, necessitated a change in the advance payments. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. But this is what is in front of me, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, you are absolutely correct that is the position of Smart Infraco. But that's why I started by saying that this is not about what some judge's position is or what Smart Infraco's position is. It's about what the position of the law is. Nobody has said that addendums to a contract are illegal. I have never made that claim here. Addendums are part of the legal process of contracting. However, the question we're raising is that when addendums change substantially what the original contract was, we have chosen to subject that to the Attorney General's advice. And that's why I'm saying that if today you have a report which we are not privy to, the document you reference as a response from Smart Infraco to the committee, we haven't seen at the ministry. But if in that they admit some liability, it comes back to support my initial submission and position that the 6 million ought to be paid to the states. When that is paid to the state, they can make whatever claims, because let's not forget, the claims are now being made on the back of the addendum. Not because the parent contract says that all the cost and risk should be borne by the private entity. Now they are saying that the addendum allows for them to move that liability to government. Because that's why they are saying that they don't owe 6 million. The cost that they claim they spent in rectifying the infrastructure is the reason why, in their response to you, I want to believe they are saying that liability is not 6 million, but 1 million and about 160,000, if I heard you right, Madam Chair. And so that's why I'm saying that claim must be submitted. That claim cannot be made by the private entity and then say that we have decided that government owes us this, so we are deducting it from government's money, and this is what we will give. No, that power does not rest with a private entity.
As for that one, I agree with you 100%.
Thank you. And so the
agree
point
with you
is
that we should validate the costs that they claim they charged, the profits that they earned, and then to find out truly if that was so. And then we can make progress and see where they owe us and then they need to pay, or where, we need to offset them with one thing or the other. But truly, I understand that we need to validate the costs involved.
That's the point of the ministry.
I have gone through the reports myself, and then in a couple of, in certain years, you see the revenue and then you see the costs. They charge the costs that they said they have incurred to the revenue, and we end up, when I say we, I mean government ends up owing them some money. So it is, in the light of all that is happening, I strongly believe that yes, we should validate all the costs that they charge to the revenues that came in, and where they ought to pay, they pay. And so as for revalidating those terms, and in terms of the costs that they applied to the revenues after the addendum or the renewal, the tweaking of the contracts, I believe that we should look at it and put it in perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy that we are in agreement that there needs to be a validation of the claims, and then we on the back of that decide how to proceed. But bottom line is, so long as there is an obligation to the state, that must be met. Because if you don't meet that, then as the auditors have indicated, we will begin to charge interest at prevailing bank rates because you are holding government revenue. So it's best that they submit what is owed to the state whilst we do the validation. Because if the longer they hold it, to settle the Auditor General, we would have to surcharge them the interest on the monies that they are holding at the prevailing bank rate.
Yeah, thank you. But, Minister, are you able to provide this committee copies of the original contract, the various variations that happen along the value chain, i.e. the various addendums, the first one and the second one, so that we can run that alongside the response that they gave us and the due diligence, so that the committee can arrive? We need those documents from you. Can you assure the committee of these documents?
Madam Chair, if I'm a minister for digital technology, if you would allow me apply digital technology, I can actually send it to you electronically. The exchange losses alone. If I should go into their operating costs, if I should ask them to break down the 134 million for me, you will see some things that will surprise you. So it's not just about the exchange losses, but there are other expenditures that are in there that ought not to be there. You sat here and told us how you are helping Ghana Digital Center to reduce their expenditure, because they usually would have flown 6 people for just one event with one person. So these are the other things that we should be looking at, because tomorrow, if we should see this thing, what are you also going to say? Is the same forex losses? No, but there are other equally important things that I believe we should spend some time to help them with, like you are helping GDCL, help them with, and that should help them reduce their expenditure. The fact that they make more revenue doesn't mean we should spend. So that's a note of caution to Minister, your agencies. MD, yes. This is advice from the chair through me to you. You are guided. We want to take it as policy position.